I was like, wow, I haven't been coding for 3 years, and this is what people are coding in now. This is really the future.
Hi, my name's Andrew Harvey, and I'm here with Emily Stolfo of MongoDB, and we're chatting with her about her RubyConf talk in conjunction with multifaceted.io and Ninefold. Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time to chat.
Thanks so much.
We're having a look at your RubyConf talk, but first off, we wanted to kind of get into something a little bit personal. What was it that brought you to Ruby as a community and as a language?
Well, I had a CS background, and I was studying at the Louvre in Paris, ironically, a couple of years after getting my degree, museum studies, and I decided that I wanted to get back into technology. So I decided to do my master's thesis on building a Ruby on Rails application for the Conservation Center to serve the scientists in that Conservation Center at the Louvre. And I didn't actually choose Ruby on Rails myself. There was an existing application there that they were already using in Ruby on Rails, and the person who was sort of overseeing this project said, you have a background in computer science, you could probably pick this up, so you can build this other app that we need in Ruby on Rails. So what was really cool about it was there was an existing application I was able to use and look at while building my own. And I found Ruby so accessible, especially after having had my undergraduate education in Java and C and C++. So for me, it was like, I was like, wow, I haven't been coding for 3 years, and this is what people are coding in now. This is really the future. So I really liked Ruby. I really liked coding in Ruby on Rails. And after that experience, I came back to New York and I pursued a position as a Ruby on Rails developer and continued doing that for a couple of years. And then eventually ended up at MongoDB, where I'm a Ruby developer. I don't do much of Rails anymore, but I do still teach Rails, so I try to stay in touch with that community. And I guess after doing that in the Louvre and then coming back to New York, I started seeing more of the human side and interacting with people in the community, and learned more about like open source and the etiquette and what the community is like, and I really liked it. And especially in the last year, since I've started going to a number of conferences, it's really cool. You get to have this sort of like other sort of like social aspect of your work, which I think is really fun.
Very cool. And so kind of following on from that, what is it about Ruby that excites you?
I like how, I mean, everybody says this, I like how elegant it is. Like I'm a very like efficient, aesthetic person, and I think Ruby is like, in the way that you code Ruby, there's no superfluous stuff around, and you can just look at it, it makes sense, and you can write code that's like very approachable to other people. And like actually in terms of being an open source Ruby developer, I think I'm at a great advantage, because the code itself is so accessible to people that when you look at Ruby code or you look at an open source Ruby project, even if you're not even a Ruby developer, you can sort of make sense of the code. And I think we're lucky in that sense that we have such a clean, like beautiful language to work with, expressive, as everybody says. So I guess like, I don't know, I just really like that aspect of it, that you can write code that's like easy to read, easy to look at, pleasant to write, and I don't know, maybe it's just by comparison with my background.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty special thing that we get to work with. Kind of moving towards your talk a little bit. I have a guess at this, but what was it that inspired you to write and submit this talk for RubyConf?
Well, my full-time job is maintaining a Ruby gem called Mongo, or actually two Ruby gems, Mongo and the BSON gem. BSON is the format that MongoDB uses to store its data. People call it binary JSON, even though it's not exactly JSON. But in maintaining this driver over the last year, or this gem, I've realized that my job as an engineer is very different than it was before when I was a web developer. And that difference is that before, as a web developer, I was coding, but that code was consumed by people with a browser and a mouse. So the code was like producing something that would be displayed in a browser or allow someone to check out and buy something. Whereas now, in the last year, year and a half, I'm running code that is consumed by other developers. So that task is completely different from being a web developer. You have to think about different things. Like, for example, how does my code look? How am I documenting my code? Am I commenting my code well? Am I using a consistent style? Am I using good variable names and method names and class names? And is the architecture of my gem approachable for people? Do people want to contribute to it? So in thinking about, or coming to that realization that my job as an engineer was, I had to do some different things than what I was doing before, I wanted to talk about that to other people because I heard, or at least from going to some conferences, I know that a lot of people are actually breaking up their monolithic Rails applications into multiple gems and keeping them, and building like a service-oriented architecture, and then using gems or thinking more about having APIs in order for their own code to talk to each other. So a lot of us web developers are also becoming gem developers or gem maintainers, and we're maintaining this code either for ourselves, for our colleagues, for our future selves, for our future colleagues, and the things you have to think about in doing that are not quite the same as just building a single Rails application that serves up pages in a browser. So I think it's important that we as engineers, as Ruby developers, think about our code as almost like a user experience, or think of like UX designers. And how would we design this code so that other developers can consume it, can use it, can contribute to it, can read it, refer to it, use it as a resource or reference. And so that's where it came from. And I tried to break it down into sort of like UX design concepts.
Very cool. Now, I mean, when someone walks out of your talk at the end, what is it that you hope that they're going to walk away with?
I try to use a number of examples, and I think people often like forget examples at the end of a talk. So the examples themselves are more demonstrative and not necessarily something that I'm hoping people would retain. So the overall concepts that I really want people to get out of this is that gem API design, or building a gem, writing software, is user experience design. And it's not, you don't write code in a vacuum. Like, so many of us today are writing code for other people, that's used by other people, or that is like contributed to by other people, whether you're an OS, open source contributor, or a web developer who's writing proprietary code. You need to think about other people. September, where he talked actually about his disability, and what he said at the end, which I think was such a good message, was that anybody can learn how to program, but to be a programmer, that's taking it to the next level. That takes, that's the advanced stage. And so, what I think, I like that idea where as soon as you think people, you're sort of taking it to the next level. You're becoming a programmer. You're not just programming. And so I sort of want people to take that away from my talk, that you're not writing code in a vacuum. You have to think about the consumption of your code.
So finally, and possibly back to a personal level, have you had a chance to look at the schedule for the conference, and are there any talks that you've kind of earmarked as ones that you really want to see?
Yeah, I think the talks are so exciting this year. I think like there's one about like bio-Ruby, there's one about memory management. There are both like more abstract talks about people, like Kinsley's giving one about diversity. I just, like, I don't know, I'm sort of torn. There's so many that I want to see and that are sort of like parallel times that I can't go to everything, but I think Ruby is often associated with web development because statistically most Ruby developers are running web applications. But what I liked about the RubyConf schedule or agenda and topics is that a lot of them go beyond web development and highlight usage of Ruby in more research-oriented ways, or more, I guess you could say, obscure or more like niche ways. And I think that's cool because using Ruby for more specific research type goals might like foster more development in for libraries like NLP libraries or libraries that like Python has a lot of that Ruby sometimes lacks or lags behind a little bit. So I'm excited about the topics, not only because they interest me, but also because I think it'd be cool for more people to get interested in subjects beyond web development and use Ruby in ways beyond just web development.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to meeting you and all the other great speakers at RubyConf.
Well, thanks so much. Look forward to meeting you.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you in Miami.
All right. Bye.
Bye.